It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I'm the guy they call Smoker Broker. Happy Thursday. Hope everything's going well. Hope everything's cruising along. Summer's almost gone already. It's just like it's like smoke and it's gone. It's amazing how fast the world revolves these days. You know, I was thinking the other day about the kids, and Dina was telling me that, you know, they're going back to school like in a week or two. I'm like, how does that happen where they get off like right at the end of May and they go right back in August? It used to seem so much longer when we were kids, and it was, but it's, God, I don't know. The 2-month thing is really, it's hard for me. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I don't know if it's good that the kids are shorter, that they should be in school, or it's bad that they don't get enough time. I guess if I looked at my kids, I would probably say it's bad because all they do is just sit around and lay the entire, summer there. But it's interesting how fast they go back these days, but they are going back to school. I mean, they're going back to school here in another week or so. So I really feel like we just got into it, into the summer, and it literally is gone. Tough week for some, tough day yesterday for all the music people out there. Oh, getting older. See old Dusty from ZZ Top pass. That was awful. You know, I noticed the older I get, and obviously the people that I grew up with and things that I look forward to, they kind of just drop off these days. And he was one of them. God, I love ZZ Top. Eliminator was one of my first favorite albums, and I hated seeing him pass. I don't usually talk about all the social things too much on the show, but that just sucked. Actually sucked for my cousin too. My cousin had them booked as their headliner in October. Why? So that's not going to happen now. But it's, I think it's awful for the brother. Yeah, it's got to be awful for the other one. That, you know, they've been together a long time. I mean, that's got to be pretty emotionally distraught that your whole existence is on another, and now that other is not there. So that's got to be tough for him too. Of course, the other kind of news, it seems like COVID's just kind of sticking itself back out there again, which just is awful. I think it's not the same thing that we were dealing with a year ago. It's certainly not the horrific fears and the unknowns that we had earlier last year. But there's no doubt that it's back again, and it's out there enough where it's noticeable. And the mask requirements seem to be coming back up. We were just told we're set to go do. We did our family vacation the very last week before school, and we're doing Disney World, God forbid, next week. And they just informed us, of course, that they are requiring the mask to go back on at least in the inside. Outside, you don't have to have it on. But and I noticed too that the federal government also extended all transportation. It was supposed to expire in September. That ain't happening now, and I've got a terrible feeling that we are, for transportation wise, we're going to be having masks on for a long time moving forward. I just don't think they're going to get away from it. I think they're going to look at it as that it's a temporary inconvenience for anybody that does it, but it's for the global good. And I think that's going to keep happening. I don't agree with it, but you know what? My opinion doesn't mean a damn thing in this world. So I'm not thrilled about the peaking of COVID, more so from an economics watch. I always start off with that. Health-wise, it's still terrible. I mean, I know people still die from it, but from an economic standpoint, there's a lot of people that die from it too. And I'm not so sure that we can take another punch in the gut from businesses having to withhold those mask requirements and distance requirements. So I'm really hoping that kind of steers clear and that we're a little bit easier going this time around. But I got a feeling that's not going to happen. California's all but said that they've gone back to lockdown. Vegas went back to, Vegas didn't come out and say they have to have them on, but they damn well told them they better have it on. So that's not good. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for real estate. It's not good for business in general if it continues like it is. Obviously, that Delta variant was much greater than they thought. The good news is it does appear, at least for what the early studies are, and for most people, that if you have the vaccination, this one is not as rough on you. At least that's what the spiel is with most, which is why they always tell you to get vaccinated anyways. I think the annoying thing about the current conversation in the battle with COVID is the obvious. We all said that at some point, even though it's not like the flu, it sure as hell is going to be treated like the flu. And I don't know why everybody's so damn surprised that, we're about to go into a winter season where COVID's out there. I'm like, do you think it was just dead or was it going to go away? We have vaccines for the flu too. It sure as hell hasn't gone anywhere. 45 million people a year are affected by it. So I don't know what the surprise is. I always thought we were going to have to deal with COVID moving forward. I don't know why we continue to buckle down like we're doing when most people have had the chance to be vaccinated, but they chose not to. Well, that's the cross they're going to have to bear. Although we've had plenty of people we knew this past week that actually vaccinated that caught it. That was where I kind of got bothered by it. I was like, well, wait a minute, that's a lot of people we knew. I thought that was out of there, but it's not. So
that's the too, right?
What's that?
That's the same case with the flu or any of these other things, right? That it's not 100% effective.
Right.
The whole point of it is, though, that if you get it, hopefully that the cases are mild.
The common sense is the vaccine's been, the virus has been installed into you. That means you should have some immunity to it. It shouldn't be a shock to your system because it's in there. All of us have it in we have the, kind of scary, right? We have the COVID virus is in us, but that is the key. It's the same thing with people who have allergies. They those of you, me included, that get allergy shots, we get pumped with that stuff every month so that when we interact with it, it's not as bad. We can't get rid of it. Our bodies are toned and we can't get rid of it, but at least it's not as bad. So tough call out there. I think it's going to be tougher to see how the general public responds to more mandates, especially people that never liked it before. They're certainly not going to like it now. Probably going to be a little bit of uneasiness as we push through the fall there. But anyways, that's that. It's life. Life has goods and bads. That's certainly one of them in there. The real estate market, which is what this show is about. So we're kind of getting into the roller coaster, where the roller coaster is getting up towards the top, getting right up to the top, and it is just about to stall a little bit. And that is not a bad thing. A lot of times when the real estate market stalls, that is usually like a horrible thing for real estate agents to hear. But in this particular case, in this particular time, it is probably welcome news because it needs to stall. It's way out of whack. It's ridiculous in what it's doing right now. We need to get it more under control, and it does finally appear that it's stalling. Those of you have been asked this quite a bit and on other shows the past few weeks. Why do we think it's stalling? Well, for me, it's easy. When you have a large group, you get to see a lot more than most of the average people do. We have 130 to 140 agents that work for us, so we have a huge flow of contracts that come through on a weekly basis. The reason why I know it's stalling is that this is the first 2-week time frame that we have had multiple contracts come in that were under list price, and we had several negotiations that were not dealing with multiple offers. And that is absolute proof that it's stalling. That doesn't just magically occur. It's not coincidence. When you've gone almost 2 years now where every offer was 30 to 40K over, maybe even 100K over, multiple offers, not even bothering, we are definitely getting to where it's starting to stall. I read a great, I can't remember if this is on another show or I said it last week on this one, or it might have even been on our call the other day. I read a great Wall Street Journal article the other day that basically said the most simplistic reason why it's happening the buyers have finally said, I'm just not paying it. I'm just not going to pay it. And you know what? Good for them. Because at some point you have to say, like, this is ridiculous. I'm not paying that amount of money for this house. And that's how you cool the housing market down. And that's a good thing. I'm going to repeat that again. That is a good thing right now for real estate agents. Because we have such a backflow of buyers that have been cheated, screwed, pushed around in apartments right now that are begging to get back to the American dream of owning a house, and they just might get that as we move into the fall. It's a good combination of schools back in, or at least everybody should have moved by now, should have by now for school. That typically slows the market. COVID probably will put a little bit of the brakes on it. It might be just enough in there of combinations of economic forces to cool this thing down and let us get back to some type of normalcy in the real estate world. So that'll be interesting as we post it. It's an interesting time frame, very tumultuous time frame for real estate. I've done it for 20 years, so I've gone through 3 of these cycles. This is the most interesting one by far. It's been very hard to predict. It also shows why you have to have an experienced agent helping you right now, more than ever. Even for someone like the guys I have on, I'm going to introduce Mike and Richie here in a second. Y'all should know them by now, but even for veterans like them, they still have to pause and go, I'm not so sure that's right, depending on what we're looking at right now. Are we still in a multiple offer situation? Are we still in a price it as high as we can? Are we still in a maybe should be a little lower? Maybe should I accept a little lower? That can be very difficult for a good real estate agent who's trying to work on habitual, normal things. And now they're dealing with forces that are out of their control, and they're really having to say, well, I'm not so sure. And that makes it very difficult. And with that said, that's a great way to bring these two in. And I always bring folks from the crew on because they really run the show. They, a lot of times, know a lot more than I do about some of the things, especially when it comes to the field. So I always bring my top crew on. We consider it. We only want the top guys in our firm to be on the show because we want the firm to be represented correctly, and we want the general public and the other real estate agents that watch this show on a regular basis to have the information they need that they consider to be relevant and why they continue to keep watching. Got my buddy over here, Mike Dellis. Known him a long time. He surprisingly is a very good real estate agent. Never would have thought so 20 years ago, but he is. And I think
right from the go.
Yeah, what a great intro from Mr. Dellis. He actually
I'm still trying to figure out if Robert's a good friend, so it's taken me 20 years to actually figure that out. So.
Yeah, it's I can't even be more complimentary. He really does get better literally every year, and not like everybody else. There are some people that's supposed to be a natural phase. I literally mean it for him. I think he has actually gotten better every year at what he does. He's clearly smarter than when he started years ago, and his analysis.
Must have been an idiot 20 years ago.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Those poor clients of yours. Those poor clients.
They'd probably sue the living shit out of him right now if they do. So always good to have him on. Personal friend of mine too. Then I got Miss Richie down there. It's always great to have her. It's a pleasure. It's our privilege to have her on. She's a busy lady, and for her to grace us with her presence is awesome because she has a very unique look at what the real estate world looks like. She's extremely intelligent, blunt, and I love that type of combination in a real estate agent. And she's a great
person. Rich, I like your introduction way more than mine.
Well, I thought hers was a much better intro than yours. But
thanks, guys. I'll just take it. I'm just going to go ahead and record this and put it in my morning affirmations. Like, look, you are a good real estate agent. You're a really good person. You can do it.
I am me.
Yes, I can.
It's interesting too, and I didn't plan this, but when I'm talking to him, it like many times on this show, it kind of is interesting the way it flows. So we're talking about networking today, and these are two interesting people to bring on the show because they're very different in their approach to their networking and the people and the price ranges that they might be networking to. It's a different world between the two of them, and they're different individuals, period. So these are two good folks to have for this show. I didn't plan it that way, but when I was sitting there listening, talking to them, I'm like, God, this is good because they have different perspectives on networking. And that really is what the main objective of this particular show is to not only talk about networking, but the massive amounts of avenues that we have for networking. My guys are probably disappointed, my agents in general, that I'm doing this show this week because I kind of talked about it on their weekly call. But a lot of times our weekly call feeds the show that we do for the week because it reminds me of how important it is and that we should talk about it more. Plus, when I go back and look at the show archive and see that it's been 7 or 8 months since I talked about it, I'm like, we probably should discuss that because this is one of the primary focuses of real estate, doing real estate. I would argue that it's probably the most important because everybody gets so caught up in, learning the contracts, learning the process, learning what to do, what to say, what not to say, but they really don't realize that none of that happens unless you start networking because you never get to that point unless you start telling people that you're doing real estate. And the only way you tell people you're doing real estate is that you get your name out there. And that's what we're going to be talking about is how you get your name out there. So it's almost more important to start this way. It's interesting, and even Mike and Richard don't know this yet, but I'm going to, I survey the guys at least once every other week because I care about what they think and what they perceive. And I usually get some really good constructive criticism. And this past week, there were some really good ones in there because it talked about, the perception of how we train, if our tutorials are out of date, if we're not coaching in the order that we should. And that's kind of the one I was going to hint at. One of the things on the survey that was hit this week with several of the agents was that they tend to be overwhelmed because the order is not really defined. So I see that. So I saw 3 or 4 of them said that. So I read it and I chuckle at first because I know the answer, but I take it seriously because I'm like, well, obviously they have an issue with that. And the answer is there is no order. There is no direct order. We have to get in there and do this one way or the other. But if you were even going to try to put it in order, this one comes first. This is the one you should start focusing in on. It's funny, in that survey, I have agents that are talking about, well, there's really no order to these contracts and, the checklist here, the checklist here. I'm like, well, you really shouldn't worry about that. Yeah, you don't have anybody standing in line. So if you don't have anybody standing in line, maybe you ought to go get someone to stand in line and then we can worry about that, which is why we're going to talk about networking. I actually am starting to think that maybe we should revise the way we bring somebody in and almost block them from the technical side of it, like the contracts and the actual work, and say, you need to show us that you can market first before we get into this piece of it. We can't do that because some of them actually have business that's active immediately. But I almost really start to wonder whether because they also say that they're overwhelmed. So maybe I should be like, all right, well, don't do any of this yet. Learn marketing first, and then we'll get over here. And I'm starting to wonder if that's the better process. When we network, there are many ways that we can do it. We can do it professionally, many ways, but we can also do it casually too. And I think that's the one that a lot of people miss. And it's funny, before we came on the show, our producer and owner of the station was just randomly discussing when I came on, the part that really can be true when you start talking about general information and what networking is really defined as. Because a lot of people, the networking, in fact, his direct words were, it could be a negative term. I mean, I actually caught the end of it when I'm coming on. I'm like, he's right. I go, Ken, a lot of people look at networking as negative. And I'm like, I don't know why the hell you're doing that. Networking can be some of the most fun things we do. Because networking should be some of the things that you do for fun. In fact, I would argue it should be the number one thing you do for networking is do the stuff that's fun because it makes it easier to do your job. And I think a lot of agents fail when they get to that point that they treat their daily routines and the things that they do on a normal basis like that's the last front for networking. Well, you know, that's probably really the front one. So Mike, on the professional side, I mean, there's not as many because it's more specific, but what are some things on a professional side of networking that we can look at, like we can go to? What are some of the things out there for an agent that says, well, I want to go network, and we're looking at the professional side. What are some of the choices they have? Where can they go? What can they do?
It's kind of you're right. It's kind of a shorter list, but you know, there's just networking groups.
That's right.
That are just, that are specifically that are just realtors. There are some that have, they bring in a realtor, a lender, someone from the title, and they bring in like all these different people. They don't have just a whole bunch of realtors or a whole bunch of lenders. They bring in a whole bunch of different people in different fields that have to do with real estate, and they kind of get their minds together and show what they do, and you can get ideas from them and they can get ideas from you.
So Mike's talking about he's correct. It's professional networking. He's talking about the one sector of professional networking where you actually pay for the networking group, and you actually pay for the fact that you have one spot, that you're the only business entity in there that's a real estate agent, and then you probably have a lender, a lawn guy, sprinkler, a windows guy, donut shop. I mean, all these people, insurance, but it's only one of them because the purpose is that they should be driving business for your trade and you should be driving business for their trade, which is the essential elements of networking, that you're trying to do something for somebody else so they do something in return. Probably the most basic definition of networking. But in the one he described, it's actually a paid one. Like you actually pay for that usually. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are some groups that you don't pay for, but the ones we're talking about, those of you are probably asking, well, how much do those things cost? They could range anywhere from $30 a month to probably $100 a month, depending on the significance of the group. If you wanted an example, we try to have takeaways on the show. I guess a good takeaways, if you wanted to check out what one of those looked like, you should go to maybe something like BNI.com, Business Networking International. That's a good one to look at. I have no affiliation with them, but that's a good one to look at as far as learning what the professional mode of networking is. So that's a good one. Mike, what about the general? There's other professional networking out there, but it's not the same and it's more random. What are some, and can you think of some examples we have out there that we go to that we probably don't want to, but we do it because we should?
Just the social side of it, I mean, there's so many social media. Just your own personal page or business page that you can network and people interact. I mean, to me, networking is anytime you can interact with somebody or a group of people, and whether they mean to give you information or you just kind of just in general conversation.
I like the definition. I like the simplicity of it because it really is. It is a group of people, and it is a message that we're trying to get out. And it doesn't have to be the same thing. It doesn't have to be professional
or social. It can just be, it could be 5 people sitting around just talking and you've networked.
Well, and where I was kind of thinking too, and you have a good transition to it, you have the other groups out there that are kind of professional, but then it's not so professional once you get there. It's like a chamber of commerce. You can go network at a chamber of commerce, probably should, but if you go, you're going to get what you expect. You're probably going to have 30 or 40 other people there that are just like you that are realtors trying to do the same thing. And that's why I like Mike's explanation. Now, that's a professional one too, but that also sometimes turns into a social one because you're really not, you end up talking to the same people that are in your industry versus the people that you're trying to get to become a client. So you have those out there as well.
But you can go to other conferences. That's on a professional capacity.
And Rich, I was just about to ask you, tell me the other ones. What are some of the other ones out there?
So you don't have to go to just real estate conferences. Of course, those happen. And that's a really good specialized way to meet with other people and find out about, different technologies or industries that are influencing your technologies that are influencing your industry. Right? What are the up and coming new apps, new cameras, new ways to take pictures, all of that. You can also go to the Better Home and Garden show. right?
I love
That's
it.
where you pick up trends. That's where you pick up on things like, oh, this is the new thing in real estate. And then when you strike up that conversation with your friend or your fellow soccer parent or your, PTA parent, they're like, oh, yeah, I saw that, or a friend of mine is considering it, or we've been thinking about it. And then you engage in a conversation about real estate, right? So it's a layered approach that started on a professional aspect, right? You went out networking in a professional capacity, and then it morphs itself into a relationship. And the whole point I have found for me in networking personally is blending those two things together and working in real time, like whether it be with social media or sharing thoughts about real estate or doing this show, just different ways where you're engaging with friends, family, customers, influencers, whatever you want to call them, and building and strengthening relationships. Because that's
why she's on the show. You want takeaways? You'll probably have to watch this on you have to rewind what she just said because it was so good. I can't just repeat every word of it. Notice how she talked about. She put two big things together, so she has two takeaways in there. She has the education part of it. She believes that it's up to her, and she's right, that she has to keep up with the industry and the standards and everything that's changed. So she has information to talk to somebody to bring those two worlds together to where she has the information and then she's talking to friends, coworkers, PTA folks, any type of organization that she's in, and she blends them together. So I love her explanation from a takeaway standpoint because not only did she acknowledge what one of the networking avenues is, she actually told you what you need to do to fuel that networking avenue. Now, what's interesting also about what she said, our call this week with our crew was more based around not knowing what to say. And I think that's a great take because that's one thing we did not discuss the other day that we should have. We talked about elevator speeches, which we'll do for y'all today too, and what the regular response is, but that could have been fueled too by going to recent trade shows or recent trends and learning the information and bringing it up in such a way that it became the elevator speech.
So can I give you an example? So
Yeah.
I don't know anything about cars, right? I just sit in it and I use it to go from place A to B. But if you're a car enthusiast and you're going to car shows, right? And real estate is what you're doing, whether it be on the side or your full-time job, go to the car show. Look at the different ways they're storing cars, cleaning cars. I'm sure they have a section on garages and elevator lifts and blah, blah, blah. Then talk to your other friends that might not have gotten to go to your car show with you, right? You were going to go as buddies together. Hey, I saw this, this, and this is how they're putting in garages in these new houses. And again, it's going to be like a very organic conversation. For me, I haven't found that a script necessarily works. Just knowing general information about things that I know interest my fellow comrades, right? Like my friends or my mom or my sister or my uncle, like, oh, this person's really into coffee. Okay. What can I make? What effort can I make to attach real estate and coffee together?
I love it. I mean, I love all of it. I mean, I love all of it because it all flows to the point we're trying to make is.
Well, then it comes off genuine, right? Then you are genuinely invested in the person and not just like a used car salesman that nobody wants to talk to and they're annoyed. Like that doesn't work. At least for me, maybe that's the kind of person I am. I hate sales pitches. They drive me crazy. There's people handing me out samples I try really hard to avoid eye contact with them.
I was disappointed that Costco brought those back this week.
The samples, they brought them back or they did not?
Oh, that was the best part about COVID is those things weren't there. Now they're back. It's so annoying.
But I do want to try all of them. God, that's not sanitary.
Hey, Mike.
There's two different types, and we've kind of hit on both, but there's two different types. I mean, you go to these professional groups, and it's all these people that come together, and you're trying to, you're working to try to find out their ways of doing things. You're helping them, they're helping you. But
you're leveling up your game, your knowledge, right? Your
but there's also the ones that you don't even know you're networking. When you're a soccer parent or you're at a car show, you're around all those other guys. And then you're the person they come to. They're like, you know what? Your car is awesome. You come here. And then everyone goes like, so what do you do? Well, I'm in real estate. Well, you know what? this guy's I want to be this guy's friend. This guy's going to be my guy.
Or
now you've got all these other
looking
new
for a
friends. I mean, you're networking. You don't even know you're networking.
Exactly. Like that, just like Mike said, right? So in that conversation, that person like, my brother's looking for a house. I don't think he has a realtor yet. Would you like to help him, or let me get your contact information?
Well, and I think that's fueled too with
very natural, very authentic.
And it's not a sales pitch.
And it's not a sales pitch.
The name badges. I mean, that's why when you're at those places, we want you to have your name badge on, even though I don't like having it on, although almost everything I wear has mine. It spurs the conversation. It spurs the obvious. Hey, do you do real estate? And then it opens up the conversation. So I love that. I love both of y'all's perspectives on that.
And talk to these people about what they're interested in. I feel like that's the what Michael said about not knowing your networking, which is where it's not forced. Have a genuine interest in who you're talking to, the person across from you. I mean,
how do they say you should hear versus listening, or is it listen versus hear? Which one is it? Do you hear me or do you listen to me? Which one? I can't remember.
Hear versus listening.
It's hear. You want to be able to hear someone, right?
No, you want to listen to them, not just hear them.
You want to listen to them, right? Okay, I always get confused. Maybe
my wife says I don't do either.
I'm a bad listener.
Most men don't do either. But where's the symbol? Nobody's gonna do it. Mike, where's Mark with the special effects? What is the point of this show? You have these flames in the back. What I need is a clown doing da-da-da.
That's true. I mean, it really is. There's got to be I don't know what's a better way to say it, Richa. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm struggling with it. I'm blanking out what I want to say with it, but there's a term that really describes how we're mentioning it. But there's special pieces to the way we put all this stuff together, and it's the intricacies that we use with these things that we're doing that make the takeaways from this. So, like you guys are talking about the car shows, and
so it's like engaging not only in real estate, but like engage with friends, family, but engage in your local community. You can do small sponsorships.
Is storing what they tell you, especially with a client. It's almost like you don't want to be taking notes because it's weird, but you almost want to note everything they're saying and what they're talking about, so you know something about them and you get to know them better. And
that doesn't mean you're going to help them in a real estate transaction in the next week. Like, that's not how networking works, right? That just means that you have put the bug in their head that, hey, I met Michael at the car show, or Richa was at the home and garden show, and I talked to her about it. It's almost like a subliminal message, like, oh, they're there. And then you as a professional are going to do the effort of, okay, if you've received their contact, taking them out for a casual coffee, or sending them a picture or a fun article about cars or gardens or vegetables or whatever, you guys have found to strike in common.
Yeah.
Again, building that relationship.
We're not telling everyone to go to the car show next weekend.
Please don't go to the car show. That's not what I'm trying to say, guys.
But everybody's got their own thing.
Yes.
And that's what they have to key on, is their own thing, their own personal thing that they like to do.
That you like to do. Exactly. Yeah. So then if you really enjoy it, so then when the people that are around you, then you enjoy being there, and then the conversations will come up more naturally and will flow more easily.
Yeah. A good takeaway there that both of y'all were kind of hinting around, and I want to make sure because it's a main part of the show and it was on one of my objectives as well, is the timeliness of this. These are not things that are supposed to have an immediate response. Networking does take a long time. In fact, it can take years. Yeah. One of my favorite examples to really prove that. And this has happened multiple times this year. So, yeah, you guys have heard this before. Networking group 20 years ago. And I remember this one because it was an unusual place that we went. It was the only place that would take us. It was on the far north side of town, north of 380, which back then was like, might as well have been Oklahoma. Now it's like the major cities in there. But it was a very rural place right on the north side of Lake Lewis there. And it was one of the first groups I went to. And I was in it for quite some time. That group grew to be huge. It was a BNI group too. But what's interesting is multiple times this year, I've had the following scenario where someone called and they're like, "Hey, Robert, it's been a while. I hope you're doing well. I don't know if you remember me, but we met at that group a few years ago. And it was the one where it was up there way north and it had the big satellite on because it was a communications place." Of course, I knew exactly what they were talking about, but I froze for a second because they were like saying a few years. I'm like, that's been like 20 years ago since. And they're like, God, it has been that long. And it resulted in a sale or a purchase multiple times from the same group 20 years later. And bad me, which is terrible for the show, not keeping up with everybody I'm supposed to keep up with. That group was the growing trend for that 20 years ago.
After 20 years, I don't think you'd be expected to keep up with 20 years worth of actual,
which you should if you're
networking.
You should. If I was
that
worth
would be
a damn,
so
I
hard,
would.
though.
Yeah,
you should.
If I was worth a damn, I would. But we're supposed to keep our databases, full all the time, and there I am, screwing around with it. But the time frame, and this is another takeaway for the show. It's so hard to teach new agents that their marketing and their networking efforts are not short-term successes. They do all this stuff and they always quit after the third or fourth month because they haven't seen anything. I'm like, you haven't even started yet. We beat this like a dead horse.
It's not like any other business though, right? That you're not getting like a weekly paycheck or every 2 weeks. And I think what happens is sometimes people get discouraged, especially people that are new or maybe don't have the confidence of like, okay, I'm really good at this craft. Like, okay, I might not have clients, but when it comes to real estate, like the contracts, what to do, how to make an offer, how to, list a house, I have it in the bag. And I think it's that dichotomy is the two worlds have to be speaking to each other. And I think you're right. The networking is the biggest part of it. If you're building these relationships in 3, 4, 5, 6 months of starting this, you probably by then enough people that are in your circle of influencers, sphere of influence will know that you do real estate. And
you said something that hit something in the last couple of weeks that I found interesting. I did a listing with Brent. We did one together, and was and Brent's my director of ops, and so we did one together, and it amazed me watching him because we had not coordinated on how we were doing it. But of course, I assumed that he has all it laid out. He's going to do everything because I'm damn well not. So I'm waiting for him to have all this stuff right. So he doesn't. And so at first I'm like, that's irritating. But then I start watching as he goes through. I'm like, well, I like the way he does that because it's what Richard was just talking about. His confidence level is at a point where he doesn't need the damn presentation. He doesn't have to go through the presentation. His presentation is in his head. It's in his laptop. He knows what to tell that person. And I was super impressed by watching him because I'm like, because I've trained him from the beginning and he was not like that years ago. In fact, he would have had like some freaking big easel and going through every diagram, 10 years ago.
10 years ago, he needed it though.
He did.
And that's fine. Now
he doesn't.
And that's fine. And that's because he has put in the time for this craft, right? What is it? You have to spend 10,000 hours doing something to be an expert. We are way, way past that 10,000 number of hours mark, right? And so some of the newer agents that aren't, a year isn't 10,000 hours of active real estate work that you're doing.
Well, what made me comfortable about it is I went there knowing if he wasn't ready that I could do it off the top of my head. But to see him, I was like, it just shows what you were talking about. There is a big difference between the confidence level of being able to go in there and go, I know exactly what's about to happen. And that's a great takeaway for networking, because, and we talked about this on our group call the other day, one of the biggest keys of networking is the confidence level. You have to have some confidence. I actually told our guys, and I like this conversation that we had. It's not, a lot of people think when you're shy that you're a bad networker. I'm like, that's not true. Like, a shyness has nothing to do with being a bad networker. It's the confidence level. You don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know what to say. And that's different from being shy. There are a lot of people that can be shy, but they absolutely know what to say. So some people get confused between shyness and being a good networker. So that's a great takeaway from today. If you're one of those people, you need to get off that train of I'm shy, I can't do it. That's the last thing that is a requirement to be someone who's a good networker. A good networker is the person that's prepared with information to interact with someone. That's why I thought Rich's example and Mike's personal example blended so well, that she's picking the information up and he's going about the more human side of it, and together that creates someone who's a decent networker. And honestly, knowing these two personally, and both of them being personal friends of mine, that's exactly how they would perform if they're in front of you. Like Mike's really good at, he has the worst dry sense of humor. My God, it's awful. He's a really super funny guy, but if you don't know him, you just stare at him for a little while. But when he interacts with somebody, his confidence level is high, because he knows Mike doesn't give a damn if he was talking to the president. He probably comes off the same way. It's actually one of his biggest strengths. Whereas Richa, her confidence level is not so much the nonchalant, I can talk whatever. She just knows what she's about to say, and Mike does too. It's just the way it's the way
I make it up as I go.
It's the emotion.
Hey, don't let anyone tell you it's different.
It's the way they execute.
And it sounds like terrible when we put it like that in like super, very, very fundamental terms. You're faking it till you make it. It's you're not making things up as you go necessarily. Yes, you might not know where that conversation with that person is going to go, but when they ask you questions about real estate, you know what you're going to say.
Yeah. And both. And again, that's why when y'all we started introing you, I was looking at y'all and I was like, that's a good part of the show. Richa, her confidence level to the client, not her. We know she's confident, because she's smart. And when she's talking to someone, though, her confidence level is high. That makes her a good networker. Now, Mike's the same level of intelligence, but he doesn't come off with his. He's more of a indirect. Hey man, you might want to listen to this, and his comment is just as smart. It's just the delivery's different. Okay, and that's the point I'm trying to make. These are two different styles that are going the same way. They both have the confidence. They both have the smarts, but two different. If these two are both, networking with the same person, the conversations are going to be very different, but the goal is the same. And that's what I got excited when I started talking about it. And when I intro you, I'm like, oh, this is good for the show today, because we didn't even mean it to be that way, but these are two different people that have the very same objective. And I think it's really the main component of this show today, is to focus that we're all going for the same thing here, but the execution doesn't have to be the same for all of us. It just has to be that we make the attempt to do the execution of it. And that's where most people fail. They just sit thinking that the business is going to come to them, which is the ultimate kiss of death in real estate.
Let me give you another example of how real estate. So say you've closed on one house, right? And most people, when you are building a relationship with your client or whatever, the hope is that any other time they have a real estate need, that they think of you also. But vice versa, whatever their business is, if you make an effort to know, okay, I closed a house with Michael at this point, and Michael does this for a living. And if I need something from Michael that's his expertise, I will reach out to him. So that you're engaged in, like you said, over years of time. So say I sell Michael a house already, right? And most people are like, okay, done and dusted, whatever, I'll reach out whenever. Hopefully Michael will reach out to me again. But no, I have to make the effort.
Yes.
So say the real estate market. So I did this just a couple weeks ago with some clients, right? They closed on a house last summer, not this summer. So closed on a house last summer, and another house in that person's neighborhood down the street was going to be coming up on the market, and they were going to be listing it, what my clients bought it for versus what this house is going to be listed for. There's a $800,000 difference there. $800,000. It's not justified in any way. And my client's house is significantly better. And obviously they got a great deal on it, right? This is before real estate became crazy.
Yeah.
But again, I sent him a message letting him know, hey, look at this house that's coming up in your neighborhood. I'm sure you can't see pictures to it because I have access to whatever, properties, coming soon properties. Hey, take a look at this. What are your thoughts about it? Can you believe prices have gone up this much? Hey, by the way, did you make sure you did your homestead exemption for this year? How did the taxes go, right? Because you prepaid taxes on a house. Hey, do your taxes need to be reconciled? Again, all I'm doing is re-engaging in a real estate dialogue. I don't have to know anything about how taxes work.
Which is in fact networking. But I'm networking. I'm putting the bug back in his head that, hey, I have a friend named Richa Gupta who does real estate. And then when he's in his own world talking to anybody else, then real estate comes up. Hopefully my name is the first one Michael or, my other friend recalls. That's the hope. That's a good transition to the last part, because this is the kind of one I was wanting to hit. The real good networking is the one that's consistent and it happens over and over again. And Rich,
and you don't even know you're doing it.
And you don't know you're doing it.
Yeah. And they talked about it, or they opened the show with it, and they didn't even know it, but they conveniently got back to it to end the show with it, which is great. The best networking we do is exactly what she just said. It's the one we don't even know. It's the fact that we're out and about. They know who we are. They know what it is that we do. A lot of people who know me, friends, and even people who are just acquaintances, I mean, it's not a surprise that my Smoker Broker co-brand is very well known out there, probably because I push the living hell out of it. Almost everything I wear has it on.
Brand recognition, it's a thing.
It is. And here's the thing. I can be out doing whatever and have this on, and someone will acknowledge, even if they don't say anything to me, real estate's really one of the first things that goes through their head, because they know that that's what I do. Now, the bigger plus is if we start talking about it, but I can promise you, and this is exactly where we were going with this. It happened a few weeks ago in Georgia, of all places. We were at a big one, the Ronald McDonald charity golf tournament in Georgia. And a lot of bigwigs there. You got all the board members from McDonald's there, and so we're playing with some strangers for sure, right? And of course, this is very typical for me. I mean, I've got like 30 of these, so I will typically have them on, and so it never goes without fail that somebody will ask me what it is. I mean, I promise you. And one of the things I've learned that was not intentional, that I actually love about my logo, is that someone has to clarify what it means. There are some people that think I run a vape store. There are some people that think I sell weed. There are some people that think I run a barbecue store. And then occasionally someone thinks I do real estate. Now, you would think that annoys me because it contradicts. What I found is that it reemphasizes what I do when I talk to somebody. And I've learned to love it. I've actually learned to like the fact when someone is like, well, what is it? What is it that you actually do? When you're out and about, and especially like at golf and playing with strangers all day long, all they see is that. And they might not even talk about it, but I promise you, and I can assure you, at the end of that round, and it might even be before, because sometimes they even ask me before the round's over, that card's getting in their hand. That card's getting in their hand. And you want to talk about networking? You can't even pay for that kind of networking, of spending that kind of time with that person, especially the person, God, easily was a millionaire. Spending time with that type of person it will not shock me. And he's in Atlanta. It will not shock me in the least bit if he gives me a call sometime in the next year or so and says, we were playing that tournament that one time, because we had a good time too. And he'll bring it up. That when you don't even think you're doing it is the best type. And that's why I loved her saying that. And my example's kind of long-winded there, but it's meaningful because that's an exact example of what happened. And that's an exact prediction that I'm probably pretty sure is going to happen, that guy at some point will contact me just because I have the logo out there. I talk about it. It engaged the conversation. One of the other wins that we have there is that he asked me what I did. I didn't tell him he asked me what I did. So I'm not the one throwing it in my face. I'm a real estate agent, which I will tell you, that's a big advantage of co-brand. If you co-brand yourself good enough, they ask you. They're the ones that are asking you what it is that you do. That's what we're begging somebody. That's what we want. We want somebody to ask me, what is it that you do? Yeah, and this is what I love about this job. Yesterday is another great example. And now I'm really talking to my agents too, because I hammer y'all for this. And the more I think about it, I'm going to hammer you even more. So yesterday, at our office, they actually have an oil change place and a state inspection place right in a car wash, right next to it. I can actually hear the music outside my office. And I went there yesterday, and everybody should know you can never judge a book by its cover. You never should look at somebody and go, whatever. So I pull it up there, and there's this punk kid. He can't be 19 years old or whatever. And he's filthy with oil, which he should be, and he's super nice, and he takes the car, and I need everything done. Oil change, tire rotation, state inspection. And that's nice when you work there because you get it done and all that. But anyways, he does all of it. I don't think even the least bit of him, because I'm breaking my own rule about judging a book by its cover. Now, I don't mind when I think it's someone who's lazy. I don't mind calling that out because sometimes I'm like, that person is lazy. And he was. But I was super
how to do real estate 101. When somebody's lazy, you tell them, look, bruh, you're lazy.
I was super surprised, though. I get done with everything.
We were doing so well, too.
I get done with everything, and he goes, you don't by chance do real estate, do you? So I look over at him, and now I'm shamed because he does recognize it, and he's asking for a reason. I go, I do. He goes, well, I've been wanting to talk to someone about getting into it, but I can't find anybody. So he's telling someone like me that, who my world revolves around bringing agents in. So, I'm not kidding too. I'm always very genuine about my own self, even if I'm ridiculing myself. I was embarrassed because I was like, this guy, what a joke. And he was a super intelligent kid, and he's trying to plan for his future. And he's like, well, I damn well don't want to do this. I go, that's good. He goes, well, do you have a card? I go, of course I do. He goes, well, I'd love to cut this. So this is the oil change guy, that I thought was a punk kid that was sitting. By the way, he was sitting. If he's watching, because I know he might. He actually had my card. He might watch. I hope you find this as a complimentary thing to you, buddy, because I am giving you a major compliment here. I really did think when I got up there, oh, look, he's just sitting there lazy. I actually thought he was very confident by the time it was all said and done. And
hey, I forgot to tell you, I sent that guy to you. That's what it was.
What'd you say, Mike?
I said, I forgot to tell you, I sent that guy to you.
But it just showed, though, the whole thing we're talking about, the name tag, that when we don't even know we're doing it. And there we go. And I won't be surprised either if that kid calls me and starts asking about doing real estate classes. I just love it. And I love the job. Everybody knows me, knows I'm passionate about what I do. Everybody knows I love doing it because I talk about it all the time. I don't even consider most of the stuff I do work. And even though I'm sitting here talking with, two of my really good real estate agents, two of my really good friends, it's great when I'm just going, this show's not scripted. So we're just going through and we're talking about the principles. We actually live them. And we have live examples. I mean, those are 2 examples in the past few weeks that are actually living examples of not even knowing that we're doing some of the best networking out there, and even better, that most likely will result in either a client or an agent. And it does not get any better than that. Y'all, I want to thank y'all for watching. We continue to appreciate the following. We loyally get 400 to 700 people to watch a week, sometimes 1,000, depending on the topic. We know our audience is geared towards newer agents and some of the middle agents in there. And occasionally we see some of the managers and supervisors watch to see if there's something we're doing that's easier explained to them. So we do appreciate it. You know, I'm biased because it's my show, but honestly, even if it wasn't, we are teaching you the stuff that you won't find in the books. We're giving you our playbooks. You know, we're not charging you for it. We're not asking anything of it. We're doing it as a favor to everybody out there because we know how hard it is to do real estate. But I can promise you, there is not one show that we do that if you're in real estate, that you were like, well, that was a waste of time. Because if you said that, then you shouldn't be in real estate. There is nothing we do not discuss on this show that doesn't affect you day to day in real estate. And that is why we do have a decent following. In fact, we are approaching our 3-year anniversary of doing the show. I cannot believe we have almost been doing it for 3 freaking years. And we have literally missed maybe 4 or 5 episodes that entire time. Every week we've done it. So love that.
I remember that first show.
What's that? You were on the first show?
I remember that first show.
Yeah, it was terrible. Yeah, it's funny. So our producer.
Was I on the first show? I don't remember.
You were one of the first for sure. And I don't know if it was the very first one, but you were on the first one of the first ones. But that's one thing. So my producer and the owner, who's become a really good friend of mine, when you first do this, he's always very clear. He's very good at prepping somebody, whether they want to do a show. There's a lot of people who want to do the radio shows or a podcast, and you know, one of the first things he'll tell you is you got to have a lot of material. It's not what you think. It's not as easy as you think. He goes, you are going to be awful your first 4 or 5 times. He's kind of like me as far as being blunt goes, which is probably why we get along really well. I'll be damned. He was right. Boy, you watch our first 4 episodes. Woo, it's bad. It's
Please don't watch our first 4 episodes then.
Terrible. We're so straight and scripted, whereas we are today. It does take a longer time, and it's certainly evolved over the 3 years to what we are today. But I'm proud of the product. It's used, and we use it as well. We use it as a very good marketing step for a lot of the agents that come in. A lot of agents cyberstalk us and watch the show when they are seeking to be interviewed. So for us, it's been a very good business venture. And I encourage people all the time, if you don't do a podcast, you really should consider it. And we certainly had the means here with the Raven podcast and everything that we do, be the producer and the owner of this particular studio and show and podcast, that you should be doing these things. And these avenues are not very difficult to do. And even more interesting to these days, we can do these right out of our home and be just as effective as we were, even if we were in a studio. So it's something you should always contact us about too, if you're ever interested in doing that. Y'all, thanks again. I hope y'all have a great week. Let's continue to rock this out through the rest of the summer, and let's hope for a very stable fall and move into an up and coming, encouraging spring. Y'all have a great one. We will see y'all I might not see you next week because I'm going to be at Disney World, so I guess we'll decide whether we do the show or
you can sit in It's a Small World and do it. It's fun.
That's good. We should do that. Although they were very clear when we did the trademarking, they made it clear don't ever have anything Disney in there.
No, you don't want any Disney music on the background.
That was intensely made. That's always a good story too. When I talk about trademarking, they were very specific. Don't ever bring that up. So interesting story. We actually had to butt heads with Disney when we created Small World Realty's trademark. All right, y'all have a good one. Y'all take care. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you guys soon. See ya.
See you later.
Bye.